In the heart of the great desert stood Banyora, a kingdom that sparkled like stars in the sand. The palace walls were made of red clay and gold, and the markets buzzed with traders from distant lands. Queen Mandira had built this kingdom with her own hands, turning dust into treasure through wisdom and hard work. But today, her son Prince Lumo stood before the golden throne, rolling his eyes at the old traditions. The royal drums beat their ancient rhythm, calling the spirits of the ancestors to witness his coronation rehearsal. "Why must we bow to dead people?" Lumo asked, his voice sharp with impatience. "They cannot help us now. Gold is the only king that matters." The queen's advisors gasped at his words. Elder Koma, the oldest and wisest among them, stepped forward. His walking stick tapped against the golden floor like a warning. "Young prince," Elder Koma said, his voice deep as thunder, "gold runs away from fools faster than water runs from a cracked pot. The ancestors left us wisdom, not just wealth." Lumo laughed, but the sound echoed strangely in the great hall. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, though no one had predicted rain. What did the dark clouds mean for the kingdom's future? That evening, Queen Mandira led her son to a secret chamber beneath the palace. The room glowed with the light of 1,000 golden coins, jewels, and precious metals. In the center sat a heavy chest, locked with 7 different keys. "This is your true inheritance, my son," the queen said, her voice trembling. "Every piece of gold here was earned through sweat, sacrifice, and sleepless nights. My father died in the mines to gather this wealth. My mother sold her jewelry to feed hungry children during the great drought." Lumo's eyes grew wide as he stared at the treasure. He had never seen so much gold in one place. His fingers itched to touch the shining coins. "One day, all of this will be yours," Queen Mandira continued. "But remember, this gold carries the tears and hopes of our people. Guard it well, or it will bury you deeper than any grave." The prince nodded, but his mind was already dreaming of all the things he could buy. The queen watched his face and felt a cold fear creep into her heart. She handed him one small golden key, the key to a smaller chest. "Start with this," she whispered. "Learn responsibility before you learn riches." But would Lumo listen to his mother's wise words? 3 days later, 4 strangers rode into Banyora on horses that seemed to dance on the sand. They wore robes of the finest silk, and gold chains hung around their necks like rivers of sunlight. The people gathered to stare at these mysterious visitors who smiled with teeth as white as pearls. Their leader, a tall man with a beard like black silk, called himself Django. His companions were equally smooth and charming. Keto with his musical laugh, Nuru with his flashing golden rings, and Baiko who juggled coins while he walked. "We are traders," Django announced in the marketplace. "We buy and sell many things, but our favorite trade is luck itself." The people whispered among themselves. What did it mean to trade luck? Prince Lumo heard about the strangers and came to see them. They bowed deeply when they saw him, but their eyes glittered with something that wasn't quite respectful. "Your Highness," Django said smoothly, "we have traveled far to see the famous golden kingdom of Banyora. Perhaps you would honor us with your royal presence at our evening gathering?" Lumo straightened his shoulders, pleased by their attention. No one had ever called his presence an honor before. "What kind of gathering?" he asked. Django's smile grew wider, like a crocodile's grin. What trap were the strangers preparing for the young prince? That night, the 4 strangers set up a magnificent tent at the edge of the city. Inside, colorful carpets covered the ground, and strange lanterns cast dancing shadows on the walls. They called it the House of Odds, and promised that anyone brave enough could multiply their wealth. Prince Lumo arrived wearing his finest robes. The tent buzzed with excitement as local merchants and nobles gathered around low tables covered with dice, cards, and other games of chance. "Welcome, Prince," Django said, offering him a cushion made of golden thread. "Tonight, you can learn how the truly wealthy make their fortunes. Not through digging in mines or trading in markets, but through the magic of risk and reward." Keto showed Lumo a simple game with 3 cups and a golden ball. "Guess where the ball is, and win double your money." Guess wrong, and lose what you bet. Lumo watched carefully as Quito moved the cups. It seemed easy enough. He placed one golden coin on the table and pointed to the middle cup. When Quito lifted the cup, the golden ball gleamed underneath. Wonderful. Baiko cheered. The prince has the gift of fortune. Lumo stared at his 2 golden coins, amazed. Making money has never been so simple. But was it really that simple, or was something else at play? Night after night, Prince Lumo returned to the House of Odds. Each time, he won more than he lost. His small bag of coins grew heavier, and his confidence grew larger. The 4 strangers praised his skill and called him the luckiest prince in all the desert. You have a natural talent, Nuru told him, sliding more golden coins across the table. Most people are afraid to take real risks. But you understand that fortune favors the bold. The other players watched in amazement as Lumo's pile of winnings grew higher. Some whispered that he must have magic powers. Others said the gods themselves were helping him. But Rika, a village girl who sold water near the tent, noticed something strange. Every time the prince won big, the 4 strangers exchanged quick glances. And when other players tried the same games, they lost more often than they won. She tried to warn a merchant named Kofi, but he brushed her away. What does a water seller know about games of gold? He laughed. That night, Kofi lost his entire month's earnings in less than an hour. Meanwhile, Prince Lumo walked home with a bag so heavy with coins that it left marks on his shoulder. He felt like the cleverest person in the entire kingdom. Little did he know that the ancestors were watching, and they were not pleased. Why did the ancestors disapprove of Lumo's new fortune? That night, Prince Lumo had a strange dream. He stood in a vast empty desert where the sand was made of gold coins. At first, he was happy. He could scoop up handfuls of wealth wherever he looked. But then the wind began to blow. The golden sand started swirling around him, getting in his eyes and mouth. The more he tried to grab the coins, the faster they slipped through his fingers. In the distance, he saw figures approaching. They were his ancestors, his grandfather, his great-grandmother, and many others he recognized from old paintings in the palace. But instead of facing him, they all had their backs turned. Why won't you look at me? Lumo called out in his dream. His great-grandmother's voice echoed across the golden desert. We do not watch those who dishonor the family legacy. We do not guide those who play with wolves and call them friends. Lumo woke up with sweat on his forehead. The dream felt so real that he could still taste golden sand in his mouth. But when morning came, he decided it was just his imagination. After all, he was winning, wasn't he? The ancestors were probably just jealous that he had found an easier way to make wealth than their hard work and sacrifice. He dressed in his finest clothes and headed back to the House of Odds. But dreams from the ancestors are never just imagination. What warning was his family trying to give him? Queen Mandira noticed the change in her son immediately. He came home later each night, his clothes smelling of strange incense from the foreigner's tent. His eyes sparkled with excitement, but there was something wild and reckless in them that made her heart heavy. My son, she said one morning over breakfast, tell me about these new friends of yours. Lumo's face lit up. Mother, they are amazing. They know secrets about making money that no one in Banyora has ever learned. I've made more gold in 1 week than our merchants make in a month. The queen set down her cup of tea with shaking hands. Lumo, you are playing with men who eat kings for breakfast. They smile with honey on their lips, but their hearts are full of poison. That's not true. Lumo protested. They respect me. They call me the luckiest prince in the desert. Luck? Queen Mandira's voice rose with alarm. Since when does a prince of Banyora need luck? We have always built our wealth through wisdom, hard work, and caring for our people. But Lumo was already standing up from the table. You don't understand, mother. The old ways are too slow. I can make our kingdom richer than ever before. He kissed her forehead and headed for the door. Queen Mandira watched him leave, and for the first time in years, she felt truly afraid. What terrible future could the wise queen already see approaching? As Prince Lumo walked toward the House of Odds, Rika the water seller stepped into his path. She was small and quiet, the kind of person most nobles never noticed. But her eyes were sharp and honest. "Your Highness," she said, bowing respectfully. "I have something important to tell you." Lumo paused, surprised that a village girl would dare speak to him directly. "What is it?" "Your new friends, they smell like vultures," Rika said softly. "I have watched them for days. They win when they want to win, and lose when they want to lose. The games are not fair." Lumo's face darkened with anger. "How dare you insult my friends? They are honorable men who have shown me respect and friendship." "Please, Your Highness," Rika pleaded. "I have seen this before in other kingdoms. These men are not your friends. They are hunters, and you are their prey." But Lumo was already walking away. "Stay out of matters that don't concern you, water girl. I know true friendship when I see it." Rika watched him go, her heart heavy with sadness. She had tried to save him, but sometimes people must learn painful lessons on their own. That evening, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. One of the strangers was filing the edges of his dice when he thought no one was looking. How long before the prince discovered the terrible truth about his new friends? Inside the House of Odds, the four strangers welcomed Prince Lumo with extra warmth. Tonight, the tent seemed more luxurious than ever. Rich foods covered the tables, and musicians played soft melodies in the background. "Our dear friend," Django said, embracing Lumo like a brother. "Tonight is special. We want to introduce you to a game that only the wealthiest and bravest men dare to play." Keto brought out a beautiful wooden box carved with symbols from distant lands. Inside were dice made of pure ivory and cards painted with gold. "This is the game of kings," Nuru explained. "One throw of the dice can win you more gold than most people see in their entire lives. But the risk is equally great." Lumo's eyes gleamed with excitement. "What do I need to do?" "Simple," Baiko said with a smile. "You bet something valuable, really valuable. If you win, we give you 10 times its worth. If you lose..." He shrugged. Lumo thought about the small chest his mother had given him, the one with a few hundred gold coins. It was supposed to teach him responsibility, but what if he could turn it into thousands of coins instead? "I'm interested," he said. "But I'll need to get something from the palace first." The four men exchanged those quick glances again, but Lumo was too excited to notice. "Take your time, friend," Django said smoothly. "Great fortunes are worth waiting for." What terrible choice was the prince about to make? Back at the palace, Prince Lumo crept through the corridors like a thief in his own home. He made his way to the secret chamber where his mother kept the smaller treasure chest, the one meant to teach him responsibility. The chest was heavier than he remembered, filled with gold coins that had been saved for the kingdom's emergencies. As he lifted it, Lumo felt a strange moment of doubt. Was he doing the right thing? But then he thought about the game of kings and the fortune he could win. 10 times this amount would make him the richest prince in all the desert kingdoms. His mother would be so proud when he returned with more wealth than she had ever dreamed of. He tucked the chest under his robes and made his way back through the palace. In the great hall, he passed a portrait of his grandfather, the man who had died in the gold mines to help build their kingdom's wealth. For a moment, Lumo thought he saw disappointment in the painted eyes. But that was impossible. His grandfather would want him to be successful, wouldn't he? Outside, the night was darker than usual. The stars seemed to hide behind clouds, and even the palace guards looked worried about something they couldn't name. Lumo hurried through the streets, clutching the chest tighter with each step. He didn't notice the shadows following him, or the fact that one of his friends had been watching the palace all evening. What was really waiting for Lumo at the House of Odds? The game of kings was unlike anything Prince Lumo had ever seen. The ivory dice seemed to glow in the lantern light, and the golden cards felt warm to the touch. Around the table sat several wealthy men from distant kingdoms, or so Django claimed. The rules are simple, Keto explained. You place your treasure in the center. We all throw the dice. The highest number takes everything. Lumo set his mother's chest on the table. The other players placed bags of gold, jeweled daggers, and precious silk. But somehow, Lumo's chest seemed to shine brighter than all the rest. Such beautiful craftsmanship, Nuru said, running his fingers along the chest's golden lock. This must be worth a fortune by itself. The dice were thrown. Lumo watched his ivory cube tumble across the table, bouncing once, twice, 3 times before coming to rest. The number was 6, the highest possible. But then Django threw his dice. It spun in the air like a tiny star before landing with a soft click. 7 dots faced upward. 7? Lumo gasped. But 6 is the highest number on a normal dice. Django smiled and showed his dice to the group. This is not a normal dice, my friend. This is the dice of kings. It has 7 sides, not 6. Lumo felt the world spinning around him. But that's not fair. You didn't tell me about the 7. Did we not? Baiko asked, looking genuinely confused. We thought everyone knew that the game of kings uses royal dice. The chest disappeared into Django's robe so quickly that Lumo barely saw it happen. Had the prince just learned his first painful lesson about false friends? Prince Lumo stumbled out of the House of Odds feeling sick and confused. The loss of his mother's chest felt like a physical wound in his stomach. How could he have been so foolish? How could he face Queen Mandira? But as he walked through the dark streets, anger began to replace his shock. Those men had cheated him. They had used special dice without explaining the rules properly. In the morning, he would demand his treasure back. However, when sunrise came, Lumo discovered that the House of Odds had vanished. The tent was gone, the carpets were gone, and even the ground where it had stood looked like it had never been disturbed. Where did they go? Lumo asked a merchant who sold bread nearby. Who, Your Highness, the man replied. No one was camped here yesterday. Lumo felt panic rising in his chest. Had he imagined everything? But no, other people had seen the tent too. Other people had played the games. Then he spotted Rika carrying her water jars to the well. She looked at him with eyes full of pity. They always disappear when someone loses too much, she said quietly. But they come back when that person is desperate enough to play again. What do you mean? Lumo demanded. They're still here, Your Highness. Waiting. Watching. They know you'll come looking for them. She was right. Even as she spoke, Lumo felt a desperate need to find them, to win back what he had lost. Where were the strangers hiding, and what did they want from him next? 3 days passed before Queen Mandira discovered that the emergency chest was missing. She had gone to the secret chamber to count the kingdom's reserves, as she did every month, only to find an empty space where her son's training treasure had been stored. Her hands shook as she realized what must have happened. She called for Elder Koma immediately. The chest is gone, she said when the old advisor arrived. My son has taken it to those strangers. Elder Koma's weathered face grew grave. I feared this day would come. I have been asking questions about our visitors. They are known throughout the desert kingdoms as the Jackals of Sorrow. They have destroyed princes in 7 different lands. Queen Mandira sank into her chair, suddenly feeling every one of her 60 years. What do they want? Everything, Elder Koma replied simply. They choose one person in each kingdom, usually someone young and proud, and they slowly take everything that person owns. By the time their victim realizes the truth, it's too late. And my son? He is perfect for their purposes. Young, untested, with access to great wealth and no understanding of real hardship. Queen Mandira closed her eyes, feeling tears burn behind her eyelids. What can we do? We wait, Elder Koma said sadly. And we prepare for what comes next. Because the Jackals are not finished with Prince Lumo yet. Outside the palace, storm clouds gathered for the second time that month. What greater disasters were approaching the kingdom of Banyora? Just as Rika had predicted, the House of Odds reappeared 1 week later. This time it was set up in a different location, behind the old camel market where fewer people would notice it. But somehow, Prince Lumo knew exactly where to find it. The 4 strangers welcomed him like a long-lost brother. "Our dear friend," Django exclaimed. "We were so worried about you. We heard about your unfortunate loss at our last game." "Unfortunate?" Lumo's voice was bitter. "You cheated me with your 7-sided dice." Quito looked shocked. "Cheated? My friend, we played by the ancient rules of the Game of Kings. Every player has the same chance to use royal dice. But I didn't know I could use different dice." "Ah," Nuru said thoughtfully. "That explains everything. You are still learning the advanced rules. Tonight, we will teach you properly. We want to give you a chance to win back what you lost." Hope flickered in Lumo's chest like a small flame. "Really?" "Of course," Baiko said warmly. "What are friends for? But you'll need something valuable to bet with. The Game of Kings requires serious stakes." Lumo's mind immediately went to the larger treasure chamber, the one his mother had shown him with all the kingdom's emergency wealth. He had promised never to touch it without permission, but this was different. This was a chance to get back what he had lost and prove that he was smarter than everyone thought. "I think I can find something sway." UST1 chest, he took 3 bags of gold coins, a handful of precious jewels, and a golden ceremonial sword that had belonged to his great-grandfather. As he gathered the treasures, shadows seemed to move on the walls around him. The painted portraits of his ancestors looked down with expressions of growing sorrow. But Lumo forced himself to ignore them. "I'm going to win back everything and more," he whispered to the painted faces. "You'll see. I'll make our kingdom richer than it's ever been." But as he lifted the ceremonial sword, it felt heavier than it should have. The weapon had been blessed by 7 generations of kings, and it seemed to resist being taken from its resting place. For a moment, Lumo hesitated. This sword had protected the kingdom for over 200 years. It was more than just gold, it was a symbol of his family's honor and strength. Then he thought about the embarrassment of losing to the Jackals, and his resolve hardened. Honor couldn't fill his pockets or restore his reputation. Only victory could do that. He wrapped the treasures in a dark cloth and crept back through the palace corridors. In the great hall, he thought he heard his mother calling his name, but when he looked back, the palace was dark and silent. The ancestors' portraits seemed to be weeping, but that had to be a trick of the shadows. What would Queen Mandira think when she discovered this second betrayal? The Game of Kings that night was more intense than anything Prince Lumo had experienced before. The tent buzzed with wealthy players from across the desert, all betting fortunes that could feed entire villages for years. "Tonight is special," Django announced. "Tonight we play the Royal Challenge, a game where kings bet kingdoms, and princes bet their futures." Lumo placed his stolen treasures on the table, trying to look confident. The bags of gold clinked softly, and the ceremonial sword gleamed in the lamplight. Around the table, other players set down crowns, royal seals, and deeds to vast lands. "The rules are simple," Quito explained. "Each player draws 1 card. The highest card wins everything." But this time, Lumo was ready. While the others weren't looking, he had slipped a card up his sleeve, the Queen of Suns, the highest card in the deck. He had learned from his previous mistake. The cards were dealt. Player after player revealed their hands. Kings, knights, and princes appeared on the table. When Lumo's turn came, he smiled confidently and reached for his hidden card. But his sleeve was empty. Panicking, he drew from the deck instead. The card that appeared was the Fool, the lowest possible card in the game. Across the table, Nuru smiled and revealed the Queen of Suns, the exact card Lumo thought he had hidden. "How did you?" Lumo began. "Magic," Baiko whispered. "In the Royal Challenge, cheating is part of the game. The cleverest player wins. Once again, all of Lumo's treasures disappeared into the jackal's robes. How many times would the prince fall for the same tricks? When Queen Mandira discovered that the main treasure chamber had been robbed, she didn't call for guards or advisors. Instead, she sat alone in the empty vault and wept for her kingdom and her son. Elder Coma found her there as the sun was setting. "How much did he take?" the old man asked gently. "Enough to cripple us," the queen replied. "The emergency funds, the ceremonial treasures, the gold we saved for the next drought." She looked up at him with eyes red from crying. "He even took his great-grandfather's sword." Elder Coma sat down beside her on the cold stone floor. "The people are starting to notice. The merchants are asking why the royal market has been closed. The guards haven't been paid in 2 weeks. What do I tell them? That my own son is destroying everything we built? You tell them nothing yet," Elder Coma said wisely. "But we must start preparing. The jackals have taken much, but they are not finished. They will want more." "What more is there?" Elder Coma was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke the words that chilled Queen Mandira to her bones. "They will want the kingdom itself." Outside the palace, the people of Banyora went about their daily lives, unaware that their prosperity was slowly bleeding away. In the marketplace, a young woman named Rika sold water and watched the palace windows, wondering when the lights would go out forever. How long could the kingdom survive its prince's betrayal? Prince Lumo had lost track of how many times he had visited the House of Odds. Each night brought new games, new losses, and new promises from the jackals that the next game would be different. He had gambled away most of his personal jewelry, several horses, and even some of the palace furniture. But tonight, Django made an offer that stopped Lumo's breath in his throat. "My friend," the lead jackal said, his voice smooth as honey, "we have watched you play with great courage. You understand risk better than any prince we have ever met. Tonight, we want to offer you the ultimate game." "What kind of game?" Lumo asked, though part of him was afraid to hear the answer. "The game of crowns," Keto explained. "It's only played once in a generation, when the stakes are truly worthy of legends." Nuru leaned forward conspiratorially. "In this game, you don't bet gold or jewels. You bet your title itself. Your right to rule. Your crown." Lumo felt his heart pounding. "And if I win?" "If you win," Baiko said with glittering eyes, "you become emperor of all the desert kingdoms. We have the titles of 7 other princes who lost to us. You could rule them all." The tent fell silent except for the sound of Lumo's breathing. He thought about all the wealth he had lost, all the mistakes he had made. This could be his chance to fix everything at once. "And if I lose?" "Then you walk away from here as a common man," Django said simply. "No crown, no palace, no kingdom." The dice lay on the table between them, waiting. Would Lumo risk everything he had left for one final throw? Prince Lumo stared at the dice for what felt like hours. Around him, the tent had grown completely silent. Even the musicians had stopped playing. The only sound was the distant howling of wind across the desert. "I need time to think," Lumo said finally. "Of course," Django replied. "But remember, the game of crowns can only be played when the moon is dark. If you wait too long, you'll have to wait another month." Lumo looked up at the tent's ceiling, where a small opening showed the night sky. The moon was indeed dark tonight, just a thin sliver of silver in the blackness. "What exactly would I be betting?" he asked. "Everything," Keto said. "Your crown, your seal, your right to rule Banyora. And..." He paused dramatically. "Your mother's crown as well." Lumo's blood ran cold. "My mother's crown? You cannot truly rule without it," Nuru explained. "The queen's crown holds the real power in Banyora. Everyone knows this." Lumo thought about his mother, probably sleeping peacefully in the palace, trusting that her son would protect their kingdom. The crown had been in their family for 8 generations. It was sacred, irreplaceable. But if he won, he would be emperor of 7 kingdoms. His mother would be so proud. She would forgive everything when she saw how much power and wealth he had gained. One throw of the dice? Lumo asked. One throw, Baiko confirmed. Winner takes all. Lumo reached for the dice with shaking hands. What would happen when morning came to Banyora? The dice felt cold in Prince Lumo's hands, colder than they had any right to be in the warm desert air. He shook them once, twice, 3 times, listening to the soft clicking sound they made. Around the table, the jackals watched with eyes that glittered like starlight. Behind them, shadows seemed to move and dance, forming shapes that looked almost like laughing faces. Are you ready, Your Highness? Django asked softly. Lumo nodded and threw the dice across the table. They tumbled end over end, catching the lamplight as they spun. Time seemed to slow down as they bounced once, twice, and finally came to rest. Double sixes. 12. The highest possible score with normal dice. For a moment, hope flared in Lumo's chest like a bright flame. He had won. He was going to be emperor of 7 kingdoms. But then Django picked up his own dice that looked exactly the same as the ones Lumo had used. He threw them casually, almost carelessly. They landed showing 13. Impossible, Lumo whispered. Those are 6-sided dice. 13 is impossible. Django smiled and picked up one of his dice. As Lumo watched in horror, the cube began to change shape, growing additional sides until it had 13 faces instead of 6. Nothing is impossible in the game of crowns, Kido said gently. Magic dice for a magical game. The tent began to spin around Lumo. He felt like he was falling into a deep, dark hole. No, he said. This isn't fair. This isn't real. But the jackals were already packing up their winnings. And somehow, impossibly, Prince Lumo's crown and his mother's crown were among the treasures they were taking away. How had he lost something he hadn't even brought with him? Prince Lumo stumbled out of the House of Odds as the first light of dawn touched the desert sky. His head felt empty and strange, like something important had been taken out of it. When he tried to remember who he was, the answer came slowly and painfully. He was nobody. Just a young man in expensive clothes with nowhere to go. The walk back to the palace took forever. His feet felt heavy, and his fine robes grew dusty and torn as he dragged them through the sand. People he passed looked at him strangely, as if they couldn't quite recognize him. When he finally reached the palace gates, the guards stepped forward to block his path. State your business, one of them said officially. I live here, Lumo said, confused. This is my home. The guards looked at each other and shrugged. Sorry, friend. Only royalty and palace workers are allowed inside. You'll have to move along. But I'm Prince Lumo, he protested. The guards laughed. Prince Lumo? Good joke, friend. Everyone knows there's no such person. Queen Mandira never had any children. Lumo felt the world spinning around him. How could they not remember him? How could his own guards not recognize their prince? Please, he begged. Just let me see the queen. She'll explain everything. Move along, the second guard said firmly. Or we'll have to remove you by force. That night, the former prince slept in the dust outside his own palace gates, ignored by everyone who passed. In his dreams, he heard the voices of his ancestors, but now they sounded more sad than angry. What terrible magic had the jackals used to erase him from his own kingdom? Years passed like seasons of rain and drought. The young man who had once been Prince Lumo learned to work with his hands, to earn his bread through sweat and honest labor. Rika the water seller had been the only person to show him kindness in those early days, sharing her food and teaching him how to survive. He worked in the fields during planting season, helped merchants load their camels, and carried water for the builders who repaired houses after sandstorms. His soft prince's hands grew hard and calloused. His proud back grew strong from carrying heavy loads. Most importantly, his heart grew wise. One day, many seasons later, he was working in the palace gardens when he overheard terrible news. Queen Mandira had died in her sleep, and the kingdom had no heir. The people were arguing about who should rule next. That night, the former prince sat by his mother's grave and spoke to the stars. "I was a prince," he said softly. "Then I was a fool. Now I seek only to be a servant of my people." The next morning, something miraculous happened. A small child, an orphan from the streets, found a golden crown lying in the marketplace. When the child put it on, everyone suddenly remembered that Banyora had once had a prince named Lumo. The people came to him and begged him to rule them again. But Lumo smiled and shook his head. "Give the crown to the child," he said. "I will teach him what I never learned, that true royalty is not in gold, but in service." And so the kingdom of Banyora gained a wise young ruler and an even wiser advisor, while the desert winds carried away the last traces of the House of Odds, leaving only the memory of lessons learned and wisdom earned. When you gamble what was built in sweat, even the ancestors may turn their backs. But those who learn from their mistakes and choose service over power can find their way back to honor.